Before we start this episode, please be aware that we'll be discussing sexual violence, attempted suicide, and eating disorders, which could upset or trigger some people. I've provided links for support in the show notes.
I was just this little skinny, naive 13-year-old girl, and unfortunately my night took a turn for the worse. The two young guys took us back to my friend's mum's empty flat, where they proceeded to rape and torture me over about a 4 to 5 hour period. And it took me a long time to realize that the shame that I thought that I felt, it was never my shame.
Hello, remarkable woman. I'm your host, Dr. Connie, medical doctor and survivor of sexual violence, and you're listening to Speak Shame, a collection of inspiring conversations with remarkable women who have faced and overcome adversity. By sharing their stories, my hope is that you may find strength, connection, and hope in your own journey, and that shame itself loses its power. Don't forget to follow the show. Joining me on this week's episode of Speak Shame is the remarkable Madeleine Black. Madeleine is a 2 times TEDx speaker, an activist, and author of the book Unbroken. She chose to forgive the 2 men who gang raped her when she was 13 years old, and she shares her story for many reasons. To end the shame, stigma, and silence surrounding sexual violence, enabling others to find their voice, whatever their story is. And also to let others know that it's not what happens to us that is important, but what we do with it. Madeleine has shared her story in TV and radio interviews, at conferences, book events, and schools, and wants to encourage others to live their life courageously too. But ultimately, she wants to inspire hope and show people that we are all so much stronger than we think we are. While she was a victim of a crime that left her silent for many years, she has now found her voice and intends to use it, not just for herself, but for so many who can't find their voice yet. So thank you so much, Madeleine, for joining me today.
You're welcome, Connie. Thank you for asking me on your show. Lovely to be here.
Well, I'm going to kick things straight off by finding out more about you. And actually, perhaps for people who maybe have not read your book or don't know about your story. And I always like to start off by asking if your life story was turned into a book, but obviously you have written a book already. And so I wonder if you could describe your chapter 1.
Oh, chapter 1 just dives straight into that night when everything changed for me, literally. 13, lied to my mum and dad, went out with a girlfriend. Her mum was away, so we used her mum's empty flat. We were meant to be staying at her grandma's. Bought alcohol for the first time. I'd never drunk, and yeah, I got really, really drunk. I was just this little skinny, naive 13-year-old girl, and unfortunately, my night took a turn for the worse, and 2 of the men from the cafe that we were into, 2 young guys, well, not much older than us, they put us into a black taxi and they took us back to my friend's mum's empty flat, where they proceeded to, I guess, rape and torture me over about a 4 to 5 hour period.
Gosh, and I said at the beginning that you share your story so that others can find their voice as well. And this isn't something that happens overnight. And
Definitely
you
not.
talk me through your life from that point onward. How was that journey for you?
Oh, well, it had obviously a massive impact on me. I fell into a dark depression. I used a lot of drugs and alcohol. Really, I tried to numb out and forget what had happened. I developed an eating disorder. I had fears, phobias, anxieties. I had such a low opinion of myself. I had no self-worth, no self-belief, no self-confidence. I thought I was this broken, damaged, kind of contaminated person. I even thought people touched me, then I could spread my contamination onto them. That's how little I felt of myself. And I didn't really want to be here. I had suicide attempts. I was in a psychiatric ward when I had my 14th birthday in there for about 6 months. And so, yeah, life was pretty dark for a long time. And you rightly say, I haven't got to this place overnight. If anybody's listening, it is not a sprint. It is a marathon, or quite a few marathons put together. And this is now 40 odd years later for me, and I've been sharing my story since 2014. So I've been sharing my story for a good 12 years, and my book came out nearly 10 years ago. So next year is 10 years, which is quite incredible. But it was the shame that kept me quiet. And I see the shame does that to everybody else, whatever the crime that's, that you've been affected by, or whether something that you've done yourself. Shame just totally destroys us. It eats away, and I just incorrectly assumed if people knew what had happened, that they would look at me how I looked at myself, that I was this, damaged, broken, contaminated person. But, shame just lies. It lies to us and it makes us believe all these things that aren't necessarily true. And it took me a long time to realize that the shame that I thought that I felt, it was never my shame. I held on to what I call inappropriate shame for years. The shame always belonged to those two men who decided to rape me that night. It was never, ever my fault. It was never my shame to start with. It was a crime committed against me and my body at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you're so right. It was never your shame. And many people who will listen to this will be able to resonate with the words that you're saying. And even myself, I was silenced by shame for 3 years after surviving sexual violence. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I wonder if you could share with the listeners how you started to speak about what had happened to you.
I
Yeah,
didn't initially.
yeah,
It took me
yeah,
3 years, like yourself,
yeah.
3 years. And in that time, what we don't speak about, it's got to come out somehow. So my behavior just deteriorated. I was such a rebel. I was just a party animal. I was really promiscuous. And I think maybe looking back, I was hoping they would guess something was the matter. I couldn't articulate. And I was also threatened by one of them, one of the ones that I call the worst one. He said if I spoke about it, they would find me and they would kill me. And I, my young mind really believed that he was especially capable of doing that. They made a few attempts to try and kill me, but obviously did not work, did not succeed. So I thought, yeah, he could do that. So the first way that I tried to tell my parents was that I wrote a note on my pillow. And when they read it, they called my friend from that night and she underplayed it. And she said it hadn't happened how I said it had. And she just said they just brought us home, it wasn't how I said. So finally find my voice. And then I felt so betrayed by my friend and disbelieved by my parents. Not so much my dad. He still wanted to go to peace, but my mum was really, really quiet. And then it took me a lot of years to understand her silence. That she had her own story of sexual violence from just being 8 years old. Now I can see as a psychotherapist, she just regressed being back to that 8-year-old when I was confronting them with my story. And she was just silenced by her shame and her guilt and her fear. And she was acting from an 8-year-old's point of view. So she couldn't say anything. My dad didn't even know about my mum's story. But in that moment, then I thought she didn't believe me. And it's just like trauma upon trauma. But slowly over time, amazingly, I met this beautiful man who is now 63 and he was 20 when I met him. So that's 43 years that we've been together, which is quite incredible. And initially I told him after he asked me to marry him after about 5 years that I've never become a mum because I thought it was going to be like being raped again. And I just thought I couldn't do that. It was too triggering and too scary, too overwhelming. But somehow a thought came to me. We were away and it was just this total mind shift. And it just jumped into my head and it said, if you never become a mum, then they've won. You're giving back all of your power and control of your own life to these two men and they don't even know. And so I always call this my best revenge, that I was then from that moment on determined not just to become a mum, and I've now had 3 girls and a granddaughter. So I feel like my best revenge continues, but I thought I'm going to become a mum and I'm just going to refuse to be identified by what had happened to me and I'm going to live my best life. And from that moment on, I decided to heal as much as I could. And having just finished Giselle Pellico's book, A Hymn to Life, which was an incredible read, she writes so delicately about such a heavy subject. It's incredible. And she has found love again. And she said you can imagine her husband and 70 men raped her and she was able to have hope and find love. And so it's, that part really resonated with me when I read her book. My best revenge was like her finding love. It's almost like sticking 2 fingers up to all these men who just violated her. So, yeah, that really helped. Meeting Stephen and becoming a mum set me on this journey, really. I was determined to heal.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. That your best revenge. And I went to see as well Giselle Pellico speak at the South Bank Centre.
I'm so jealous. I would
Oh,
love to have seen her. It's far from me from Scotland.
I completely agree. And finding hope, because that's taking back your power. And
Absolutely.
I think as well, you talk about that moment where it just came to you that I can't not become pregnant because of them. I'm going to enjoy my life and have a great life. And it's lovely to hear that. And I wonder then where the decision then to share your story more publicly came from.
Yeah, that was also a gradual thing. That wasn't, an overnight thing. So I took part in a few campaigns. I worked for Women's Aid and I worked as a volunteer at Rape Crisis for a while before I trained as a psychotherapist. And there was a campaign, I think it was called This Is Not an Invitation to Rape Me. It was a Scottish Rape Centre, Rape Crisis. And they asked me if I would take part, and I said yes. And the photographer or the journalist called and said, "Can we have a photo?" I went, "Oh, no, no, no photo." And I was still, I could see looking back, that's still my shame. So they just used a standard photo of a woman. It's always like a silhouette by the side of a window or something. I don't know why. And so it just said Madeleine from London. It didn't have any details or anything, maybe my age. And then gradually over time, I started to do a few more. And then, as you mentioned at the start, I came to a place of forgiveness, really for me, not for them. It was to let me be free of all that happened, to just accept everything that happened and to let it go. Um, I was researching forgiveness and I came across the Forgiveness Project, and their founder, Marina Cantacuzino, just online heard about my story and asked if she could share it publicly on her website. She collects stories of forgiveness. And she again said, you can be anonymous. You don't need to put your name or your photo. And then I just thought, I'm just so tired of being ashamed for a crime that was committed against my body. You know, um, Years ago, I went to a conference where I was speaking actually, but the first person who spoke was a psychologist. And she said that the pressure of constantly holding that shame and is like keeping a beach ball underwater. And I just thought, I've been holding this beach ball underwater for years and years and years. And I just thought it's time to let it go. So I just thought, why should I still be ashamed? So it was a bittersweet thing. It was very liberating. It was very scary because I thought some of my friends knew, some of them didn't know at all. Some of them didn't know it was near fatal. I've never looked back from sharing my story publicly because I saw not just for me, standing in the shame, when we put light on it, it can't exist. When we keep it in the dark and we keep it secret, it can grow and mutate. But when we shine a light, it has no place to grow. It just can only be diminished. So that happened. But also, friends started to share their stories. And one of my friends was in her 60s and she shared her story for the very first time with me. She said, "I've never told anyone but." And I've had that sentence so many times. And then I saw Marina from the Forgiveness Project. She doesn't call us storytellers, she calls us story healers. And I really understood the power that comes when we share our stories. And, I really believe that if somebody hears a story in their life at the right time, it has the opportunity to give them a new map. They can navigate their life in a completely different direction that they ever thought. Like Giselle, listening to her speak can just offer a woman hope that, gosh, she can love again after what she went through. And then surely I can get past this. I can heal and I can have a good life. And that's what I saw, that it's almost like a service. If I can speak publicly and show my face, then I can do that. So it's almost like my duty in some way.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. When you said story healers as well, I was
Yes,
like,
I love that
oh,
word.
one of the words beautiful. And actually, it really leads me on because I was going to ask how you found your journey has connected you with others who maybe have faced similar challenges or maybe experienced shame for whatever reason. And you talked about the example of your friend who told you her
Yeah.
story. And I wonder if you've come
Yeah,
across.
I had an amazing woman called Debbie Thiening, and she got in contact. I met her actually at a conference. She was very shy. She came up to me to speak, and she said, "Oh, I just wanted to say hi." Then she messaged me afterwards, and she said her therapist suggested she read my book. She lives in Glasgow, and to watch my first TEDx. I think I just had one then. And then she said it really helped her. And when I understood why, because maybe a year or two later, in the post from Amazon was her book. She said, I encouraged her not so much to find her words, but to write her story down. And the details were very, very similar. The details of what was done to her body and what was done to mine were very similar. And there was more than one person as well. And I just thought, wow, the ripple effects of me speaking out have gone to her. She's now put her story out there and she's going to send ripple waves in a different direction. And it's just like, just amazing how it just connects and connects. So that was incredible to receive her book in the post. She said I helped her, but obviously she was the one who wrote the words down. So amazing, amazing journey she's been on. And then I'm also standing on the shoulders of other people whose voices I've heard and people that I've heard speak. They encouraged me to think, maybe I could write my story down. And I think I was just going to write it down for me. I didn't ever think I'd write a book or share my story publicly, but I began to write, and then I began to write and write. I was like this demon. I was obsessed. Just the words, literally, I always say I vomited my story because in about 8 weeks, I'd written like 70,000 words. It was all I could think, see, dream of was the words and the titles. And yeah, I was very fortunate because after applying to publishers in about 3 months, I got a contract. And I thought, okay, once I'd written all the words, I thought, this is more than just writing it down for me. This could be a book. And it just went from there.
Gosh, and I just think when you described it as a ripple effect, I think that's exactly it. And we'll never know how many women, men, how many people in general have been positively impacted by hearing your story and the difference that it makes to their lives. So thank you on behalf of everyone. And I wonder how it shaped you as a person today.
Yeah, if I would look back to when I was 13, I don't think she'd ever believe I'd be doing what I'm doing now. And people say, don't you get nervous? But actually, when I stand there, I don't think about me speaking. I think about who's listening and who's in the audience. And I spoke recently in Birmingham at a convention called Crime Con, which I wasn't sure about because it's like a collection of people that are really interested in true crime. And I thought, I don't know if this is a bit voyeuristic or is it okay? But they were so like survival led. It wasn't voyeuristic in any way. So it was really, really good. And so many people again spoke to me afterwards or, in the break, whatever, and said, my story is your story. And I said, yeah, my story is a story of just many, many people. My story is not uncommon. You yourself you shared with me, so many of us know someone. And even if we don't know that we know someone, we will still know someone that's experienced abuse, sexual assault, sexual violence, male and female, as you say, sometime in their life, more than one occasion as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You talk about wanting people to find the courage in themselves and also about hope as well. And I wonder if someone's listening to this and maybe they have experienced something similar or maybe something that is bringing them shame, what advice would you give to someone if they feel stuck in this
Yeah.
situation?
I would say they can find their voice because I think when we keep it inside, it just takes up like so much space inside of us and it gets all consuming. And if we can give it oxygen by sharing it and, I guess be very careful who you share it with. Make sure it's somebody that you trust. Doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be a friend, a hairdresser, anyone. Just make sure it's someone that you trust. And if you can't find someone to share it with, then write your story down and read it. Stop. I denied it for years and I minimized and said it wasn't that bad. It wasn't really rape and it was my fault. And what did I expect? And all of that guilt stuff and negativity, self-negative thoughts. Stop denying it and find someone to share it with and speak about it. It's really hard to break out of shame, but it's really possible.
Such wide words, Madeleine. I imagine that someone listening to this now will take that on board, and I hope it does make a difference for them. And for listeners in general who have not experienced something like this, what do you hope that they might take away from your story?
Well, everybody has a story. Whether they've not experienced sexual violence or rape, they maybe have grief, or they've maybe, they've had a house fire. Or everybody has a story. And just to show them that it's not what knocks you down, it's how you stand back up.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we can get knocked down maybe 7 times, but we stand up 8 times. And then, we can always carry on. And I think it's part of human nature, like homeostasis, is always to survive and always to heal and always to improve. I was very fortunate. I think I was born to super survivor parents. And my mum had her neck broken in an operation, and she healed herself. And my dad was a Holocaust survivor, and all of his family, most of his family were killed. And his little brother was just 6 years old, who was gassed in Auschwitz. And my dad, if you met him, he just loved life. He mucked about. He loved children. He connected with children much better than adults. Didn't sleep an awful lot, but you'd never know if you met him that what he had been through. And I just saw it is really possible. When you read my bio at the start, it's not about what happens to us. It's really what we do with it. And everybody has a story. And it's not about comparing, somebody saying, well, mine wasn't as bad as hers, because only in my early 50s, when I was writing my book, did I realize I had been raped 3 more times. And I had no understanding of consent in those days. We weren't taught consent, we're talking late 1970s, early 80s. That wasn't a curriculum in school, and public health, none of it was around then. And I just said no, and they said yes, so they just carried on. And again, I just felt myself leave my body like the first time, and again, I left my body, and again, I left my body. And only years later that I realized, God, that was 3 more times. And these are the chapters that actually people say, listen, I haven't experienced the violence you experienced the first time, but the other time, yeah, I was very drunk and I said no, and I just woke up when I was naked, or my underwear was off, or so many people have reported things like that to me, disclosed stuff like that. Reported, I'm not the police. Disclosed. There's just so many stories. But yeah, it's always about what we do with it. That's what matters, I think. How we respond.
Yeah. Oh, man, you're so inspirational. I can see why as well. You're invited to all these talks and make such a difference hearing your story as well. And I wondered if people who are listening to this now want to find you, want to connect with you, want to get your book, how do they do that?
Well, my book is you can get it from your local bookstore. You might need to order it, or you can get it on Amazon. I have a website. I'm on social media. You can find me on Instagram, or not so much on X. I don't really like it over there anymore, but Facebook, I have a public page. So yeah, you can find me.
I will put all of those links in the show notes
Thank
so
you.
people can find you. And I always like to end the podcast by finding out if you had to name one remarkable woman who has inspired you, who would it be? And
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. I mean, my mum is amazing. She never ever had any support from being raped as a little girl at 8, and she got through it. But I would say actually Dr. Maya Angelou, because until I read her books, I Know How the Caged Bird Sings. I didn't know that you could write about rape. That was the first time I'd ever seen it written in a book. And first of all, it really shocked me. And then she went on to be this incredible figure who had this history of abuse and rape. And that also showed me that, yeah, we can turn our pain into purpose. I mean, I wish I was a beautiful poet like she was, but I don't have that articulation of words. But yeah, she really showed me that there is hope. There is a light at the end of a very dark tunnel. We can walk through that tunnel. We can walk through the fire and become stronger for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you to your mum. Thank you to Maya Angelou. And thank you so much to you, Madeleine, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Speak Shame with me, Dr. Connie Corrali. And thank you so much to Madeleine Black for sharing your story with us today. Please take a look at the show notes for information on Madeleine's social media handle so that you can connect with her. If you'd like to join the community, head over to @DrConnieCorrali on Instagram. And if you're a remarkable woman who wants a weekly reminder that you were never broken, then sign up for my newsletter, Born Worthy. You'll find the link in the show notes. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get a new episode every other Thursday. Until next time, take care.